Hi, this video is to discuss the events that led to the death of Kendrick Johnson, and to hopefully be able to put to rest some of the rumors that are involved on social media, that are in the mainstream media as far as newspaper articles, news reports. A lot of things here have been misconstrued. And I feel like, that if you search YouTube, there's tons of videos for how Kendrick died, what is plausible, what isn't plausible, and they're all pointing toward him being murdered, with the exception of just a few. And I just want to put some of that to rest. I will state for the record that I have viewed the case file. I have viewed the hundreds of statements from everything from kids at the school that were classmates to anybody that was involved. I've seen the entire case file in its entirety. I've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb to try to look and see which direction this really needed to go. Was he really murdered? I'll tell you, 2 years ago when this first happened, I did live in Valdosta, Georgia, and immediately my first thought was something else happened to this child. He didn't just crawl into this mat for a pair of shoes and die. It just seemed like too much of a freak accident. There were automatically fingers pointed. I think that racial biasness has come forward. I think there's been some race baiting in this. Once the case was closed and I was able to view the autopsy pictures, the statements, the tons of mounting evidence as to what happened to him, I now understand completely what happened. And I just like to state for the record too that, and you can look this up, many people die every year of positional asphyxiation. I'll give you a case in point. You may be able to research this in the media. It was within the past month or two, and I believe it was in the state of either Wyoming or Montana, that a young child, I think he was about 2, had climbed up onto his kitchen counter. The kitchen counter was between the refrigerator. And, oftentimes if you look at your refrigerator in your kitchen, there's, maybe a 5-6 inch gap in between the countertop and the refrigerator itself. He was reaching for a box of cereal or a snack of some sort on top of the refrigerator. He fell into that crack between the fridge and the countertop, and he became wedged. His mother didn't know. He obviously couldn't scream. She was in the house, and he died within just a short time of positional asphyxiation. It was the exact same cause of death. It was a freak accident. There was no manhunt or, they did not blame the mother. It was just a freak accident. He tried to climb up there and got wedged in between, and he couldn't get out and he couldn't scream. And when you're upside down for that long of a period of time, the blood rushes to your head and, you eventually pass out. That being said, it's not as uncommon as the internet rumors would like to make it out to be, that positional asphyxiation happens, or asphyxiation or lack of oxygen in general happens in the mining industry, in the industry of factory workers and people in steel mills and things like that. These accidents happen all the time. They're rarely ever reported because these people are grown and they understand the risks, but they still happen. This event, while tragic, was not murder. It was not, there was nothing that was done to this young man outside of a freak accident of him attempting to get a pair of shoes out of a gym mat. And I'll go into some of that too. I want to talk about Brian and Brandon Bell. They have been named as targets, and I'll say that with quotes, targets by the DOJ Michael Moore for the state of Georgia. They've been issued target letters. Their names have come up ever since they refused to answer questions. I just finished watching the video. It's 3 hours long of the Johnson family and the trial that took place when they blocked the entrance to the courthouse several months ago. And, you know, in that there were a lot of things that were said that were followed up with cross-examine, but the Attorney King for the Johnson family stated lots of different things that were simply untrue, that were not anywhere in the evidence, that were not provable or plausible to have happened. One of those being Brian and Brandon Bell. Their father is a FBI agent. I want to say for the record first, I don't know them. I have no affiliation with them. I've never met any one of them. But I am smart enough to have read this case file and been able to go from point A to point B. So Brian has been the main one that's been accused of killing KJ or something of that line. The biggest piece that comes into play here is the altercation that they got in a year or so before KJ passed away, that was on a school bus heading for a football game. I want to talk about that for just a minute, if you will. First of all, Brian and Kendrick were friends. They had been in football together, and they had gone to school together for quite some time. Will I say that they were best friends? No. But I will say that there is record of testimony or media accounts that KJ had spent the night at the Bell's house. So they were obviously close enough friends to have that kind of relationship outside of the football field, outside of the classroom. There was some rousing between the two of them, perhaps some ya mama jokes. We don't know exactly. On the school bus heading for the game, there was some picking back and forth, and Brian stood up, went to punch KJ because he thought he was the one doing it, and apparently it turned out that he wasn't. It was the person next to him or something to that effect. The punch landed empty. He didn't make contact, and KJ tried to return, and from what I understand, that punch also came up empty. And both the boys were punished. They weren't able to play that evening because Brian and Brandon were both on the football team. The Bells were present at the football team, even though it was an away game. And so the coach had said that part of his rules are you fight on the bus, you don't ride the bus home. And so Brian went home with his family, and KJ didn't have anyone there at the game, so he rode home with the student resource officer, I believe was the title of that person, which is a police car. But there's also testimony that states that he was kind of excited about that, to like ride in the front of the police car. You know, he wasn't upset about it. He may have been, I can't speak for him, but he may have been upset at the situation, or that he didn't get to play or whatever. But after this altercation between the two of them, they were both suspended because Jackie Johnson was upset over the altercation, and they weren't going to punish either of the boys, but after she pushed and pushed, they ended up suspending both of them. And after that, the boys made up. They were no longer at each other's throats. They, you know, didn't have any ill will towards one another, if you will. And keep in mind, this was over a year prior to KJ passing away. Whereas the rumor states that, or one of them that I've heard states that it had something, you know, that there was unfinished business, so to speak, between that altercation, and Brian wanted vengeance for that, to the point that his father had, Rick Bell, had urged them to hurt KJ in some way. All of that is rumors. It's all speculation. There's nothing that we've been able to find through the investigation that puts any of that into perspective that's plausible or that actually happened. To my knowledge, and I've been involved with this for over a year now, there is no evidence to that. There's no evidence that Brian wanted any kind of retribution, for the school bus incident or anything of that nature. So to the whereabouts of Brian and Brandon, it is heavily stated, and if you take the time to not listen to all the rumors that are around on social media and to actually get the case file yourself, it is stated that Brian was in class. He went to all 4 blocks. Lowndes High is set up on block system. They have 4, I believe it is 4 classes a day. They're longer periods, and he went to all 4 of them. At the time that KJ went missing, Brandon was on a bus to, I think it was Macon, for a wrestling tournament. He simply was not there when KJ went missing. Now I want to talk about something else for just a minute. There is a video that circulates on Facebook where it shows Brandon walking back and forth in a hallway. One of the allegations is that there is a red insignia on the sleeve of his shirt, and that is dried blood or blood from him. The insinuation is that he got into a fight with KJ. That is not true. That shirt has been examined close up by experts. That is the logo. It's a Ralph Lauren polo logo on the side of that shirt. It is not blood. In that same video, they, if you notice, most of the time in that video that you can find, the timestamps are not there, and the reason that they're not is because they've taken him walking to the locker room and changing clothes, coming out to get something else. He had his other clothes in a bag and then changed, whatever, back and forth. That, why was he pacing the halls right around the old gym? That puts him, there at the time that KJ came up missing or was last seen or whatnot. That's simply not the case. He changed clothes to go get on the bus to go to the wrestling tournament. He probably walked down the hall back and forth a couple of times, but it's sped up in that video to look like he's just, keeps on going back and forth, and that's just not the case. Another thing that I want to talk about, Brian's attendance record. There are statements in the case file that's from his teachers that state that he attended all of his classes. He also said on the WSB interview that was done by the Atlanta journalist for that station a few months ago or a month or so ago, that he went to first block, second block, third block, fourth block, and that's exactly how he said it. To all the attendance records, to everything, that is the truth. So let's put this theory into motion for just a minute and look at what would have had to happen for Brian or Brandon to have hurt, murdered, whatever, KJ at any point during that day. Brandon would have had to have gotten off the school bus or not gotten on it, stayed behind, and committed whatever acts or said that he committed or assisted in, and then gotten on a bus that was already in progress to Macon, and without anybody knowing. Brian would have not been in attendance in his classes. He would not have been, his whereabouts would not have been ascertained afterwards if he was involved in this. And those facts are, they're facts. They are accounted for. So let's look at the cover-up aspect. The family, the Johnson family, has stated through their attorney that these boys did, in fact, hurt someone. There have been numerous accusations flown around, be it on social media or the news or whatnot, that because they didn't talk, that meant that they were guilty, and that they did hurt KJ in some way. So it's just not possible. The scale of the cover-up would have had to have been massive. So it would have gone from everyone that was a teacher at the school to coincide with their story, the students that were at the school, the law enforcement officials that were on the scene, the EMTs, the investigators, the sheriff, the GBI, everyone. So you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of people that would have all had to corroborate a story for two young kids as an alibi. Now, I understand that I grew up in the South. I understand completely that there are things like the good old boy system. And, you scratch your back and I'll scratch, or you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours kind of thing. But this would have been massive. You're talking about a whole bunch of high school students who would have known or had some kind of knowledge of, that have never spoken, that their stories have never wavered, not one time. I have a daughter that's around that age, and she can't keep her mouth shut for 5 minutes. If she knows something about somebody, everybody's going to know about it. And that's just fact. These kids, they tweet everything. They talk about everything. Their sense of privacy is, they just don't have one. They're very open. And kids talk. At some point, somebody would have said, I know what really happened. And that would have caught on. But that has never been the case here. The only time that we ever saw a statement to the contrary of what I'm speaking of was the one statement that was investigated by Lowndes County and the GBI, and it was supposedly stated that so-and-so told so-and-so that either Brandon hurt KJ or they knew what really happened or something to that effect. When that witness that had that statement or posted it, whatever, was questioned, they willingly admitted that they were lying, that they wanted to kind of gain popularity or attention or whatever from knowing information. And, they were perhaps could have been charged with, a crime if they had not finally admitted that, this is not true. I made this up to sound important or whatever. That's the only instance that we've seen of anyone's story changing ever. Back with you. So, as I was saying before, the cover-up would have had to have been so broad scale that every law enforcement officer in the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, perhaps the Valdosta Police Department, the GBI, they would have all risked their pensions, their jobs, their retirement, their livelihood, their family, everything for what? For two kids who, the rumor mill says that they did something. That's just, if you use any kind of common sense at all, it's just not possible. When you go on social media and you look at this case, some of the biggest things that you will find are his missing organs. So let's talk about that for just a minute. The coroner and pathologist that completed the autopsy on Kendrick through the GBI, I'm not talking about Dr. Anderson, who we can talk about later, have stated and written statements to the effect. There's even a video, I wish I could insert the link that you can look up, that is the head of the medical examiner's office for Georgia stating, and I quote, he would put his entire career on the line to say that Kendrick Johnson was not murdered, which is huge. I mean, this man's going on record, on camera, saying, I take my entire reputation, my job, my everything to tell you this child was not murdered. And he had no dog in this fight. He doesn't work for Georgia or for Lowndes County. He doesn't work for Valdosta City. This is a man that's up in Macon or Atlanta somewhere and is willing to say that. So the organs are stated that they were put into a plastic bag, a garbage bag, into his chest cavity and sent back down to the funeral home. What happened after that? We don't know. I can tell you that, and I've done the research, if you look up funeral home practices for decomposing organs, because mind you, after his autopsy, he had yet to be embalmed. So decomposition was full. He was in complete rigor mortis. Those organs were rotting. They were not viable. There was, it's just deteriorating pieces of flesh inside of the body. So it is somewhat common, not always, that the funeral home will dispose of the organs, whether they be incinerated or whatnot. They're not needed after the embalming process has happened. The autopsy had already been completed. The medical examiner's reports had already been done, so there was no need for any of that to be kept. The samples were all taken of all of the organs. That's all in the autopsy report that you can get a copy of. I have read it from cover to cover. I'm not going to say I understand every single medical terminology in there, but the be-all, end-all of it was that he died from positional asphyxiation. So it leads us to not completely understand, but if what the GBI crime lab stated with the autopsy is correct, they put the organs in a bag inside the cadaver's chest cavity, and then sent the body to the funeral home that was chosen by the Johnsons, then it leads us to believe that the funeral home just threw away or whatever the organs. I want to state for the record that when his body was taken from the school to the crime lab and to the autopsy in Macon, his organs were intact. And the reason that we know that for a fact is because samples were taken of his liver, his kidneys, etc. During the autopsy, and that information is in the autopsy report. So they were there. They were not harvested. He was not killed for his organs, and they were not harvested after he was already dead. I'll explain something else. If a person dies within just less than an hour, their organs are no longer viable for transplant or medical research or whatever. When a person's heart stops beating and their brain stops working and blood stops pumping, rigor mortis sets in very quickly. I've worked in the medical profession. I have seen people that have passed away, and I can tell you that often, by the time the funeral home gets there, the corpse is stiff. And this happens quickly. Things are not viable anymore. So there's another piece that I want to talk about it's not as appealing. There is a picture floating around I've seen it on the Kendrick Johnson Memorial page. I've seen it on Jackie Johnson's Facebook page that shows Kendrick's teeth and the right side of his tongue, kind of sitting like that. Post-mortem, obviously. The tongue has a brown, gray, black spot on it. His teeth and gums have started to, looks like, kind of recede a little bit. They're still very white and all intact, but that is due to decomposition and nothing more. Soft tissues such as the septum, the tongue, the gums, anything like that is going to start to decompose, rigor mortis to set in before anything else. It's just kind of part of the death process. That does not show that he was beaten in any way. It also does not show, there was one statement that his teeth were knocked out. His teeth were all intact, and that's very viewable by the autopsy photos that were taken. Another thing I'd like to talk about is there was an allegation on one of the Kendrick Johnson pages. To be honest, I don't know which one it came from first, but I've seen it a couple of times, that because of the autopsy picture where KJ has two parallel long incisions down his backbone, or down each side of his back, that the allegation is that he was hung or hoisted into the mat by some kind of hooks, and then they have like three different, these big like meat hooks almost, on display there as, you know, possible instruments that were used for that. Those two long incisions are part of an autopsy. They're done with every autopsy. They're done to be able to take tissue samples, and then there's also a huge incision that's made at the back of the skull to be able to examine and take out the brain. That's something that anyone who takes the time to look up the information online of how an autopsy is conducted, what incisions are made, so on and so forth, can find that information out. It did not mean that he was hoisted by hooks of any kind, and even if he was, the way that those incisions were made or whatever, let's just roll with that theory for a second, he would have been put into the mat feet first and not head first, and he was definitely in there head first. There's tons of pictures in the case file that show that. So that is out the window. Now I would like to talk about the Johnson family. No doubt they are absolutely grieving the loss of their son. I get that wholeheartedly. I have children. I can't imagine losing one of them. It hurts my heart every time I think about it. Especially to something that's as tragic as of an accident, you know, of just a weird, odd, strange, you know, incomprehensible thing. I'll say again, when this first happened back in January of 13, my first thought was something happened to that kid. He didn't just fall in that mat. But again, the education, the case file, the true evidence, the facts, the real hard facts of this case are that is exactly what happened, unfortunately. No doubt that this family was left with questions and was grieving. And, you know, I can't imagine the what ifs or the, you know, ideas that were running through their head. Like, I can't even begin to play that out. I guess I can't say how I would react if it wasn't my child, but I can say this. I would never, not once ever, slander someone, defame someone, or accuse someone without true, real, just cause. Both Brian and Brandon, along with Ryan Hall, have been accused from almost day one. And on day one, the day after Kendrick's body was found, Mr. Tooley, who I believe is the grandfather of KJ, was on record, on video, it's on YouTube. He stated, and I will paraphrase, but it's very close to what he said. There was unresolved conflict with a G.B.R. agent's son. Okay. Well, Rick wasn't G.B.R., he's FBI, for one. There was an unresolved conflict, if the conflict that he or person he's referring to with Brian and the altercation on the school bus, you know, a year prior. It was a witch hunt from day one. Stride Jones has testified, he's a lieutenant for the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office. He has testified under oath at the Johnson's trial for them blocking the door to the courthouse. That video is pretty telling as far as his testimony. It's about 3 hours long, so be prepared to watch it. That he told the family the day after KJ was deceased that their working theory, and that's very common in an investigation, is that they come up with some kind of theory and then see if that works or if it's something completely different. And they're looking at evidence from all sides, all while they're trying to figure out what happened. You know, they're not telepathic. They have to use the evidence at hand. So he told them that their working theory was he went in to grab the shoes that he was trying to get out in an investigation, is that they come up with some kind of theory and then see if that works or if it's something completely different. And they're looking at evidence from all sides, all while they're trying to figure out what happened. You know, they're not telepathic. They have to use the evidence at hand. So he told them that their working theory was he went in to grab the shoes, that he was trying to get out of the mat. There are statements that corroborate that kids often toss their shoes under those mats when the mats were just sitting there singly, and they could pop one up and pull the shoes out without any problem. The problem that day was that the mats, that I believe that was the first day back from Christmas break, they had cleaned the gym or cleaned the floor or whatever while Christmas break was happening, but had decided to store the large mats like KJ was found in and the smaller ones that are still pretty big. There was 21, I believe, mats in the corner of that gym. So the ones on the outside where the kids would normally store their shoes got pushed to the inside of this huge pile of mats. Combined of these 21, 20, however many mats it was, you're looking at well over 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. Those mats are heavy. The big blue ones, like he was found in, I've read, weigh anywhere from 200 to 500 pounds. They are very, very heavy. So if you think about it for a minute and use just a little bit of common sense, if they're not in the outside ones, then he climbed up on top to try to figure out and look down in each one to see which one had gotten pushed all the way back with his shoes still down in there. And once he found the right one, I would have probably done the same thing, even though I'm short. And that's to extend my arm down, to reach in while the rest of my body's probably out of the mat. So just his torso's in there to reach down and grab his shoe. And he, at that point, he either couldn't reach it that way, so he wriggled a little bit more of his body in and then became stuck, or he fell from the, torso down through his legs and everything and fell into the mat and could not get back out. I've heard many people on social media say, well, if I got stuck in a mat, I would just tip it over. You cannot tip a mat over that, number one, weighs that much, and number two, is wedged in between 20 other mats. It's not going to be possible. You can't cause a domino effect for something that heavy that's wedged all together like that. The other thing that I've heard a lot of is he would have screamed for help. I would have screamed for help too if I was stuck. Problem is, he's in a big foam mat. He would have been muffled. Everything would have been muffled. There's a YouTube video, and I urge everybody to check this out. Some University of California, I think it was, students, and they call it the Kendrick Johnson mat test or something like that on YouTube. Look that up. A bunch of kids, they grab one of these mats that's very, very similar to the one that KJ was found in. They put one young man down inside that was about the same build and size as KJ, and you couldn't hear him. You couldn't hear him scream, and they were filming it from like 3 feet away. He couldn't wiggle himself out, and that was just one mat. That wasn't all of them put into the corner together. He couldn't get out. He was stuck. They pulled him out after 15, 30 seconds or so, and he was hot, he was sweaty, and he said he was never been more scared. He said that it's ridiculous in there. I can't imagine being surrounded by foam, Another thing that I want to say while I have the chance is there have been many people that have stated something to the effect of he couldn't have fit in there because his shoulders were 19 inches and the mat opening was X inches or whatever. Well, I want you to think about something. So my shoulders are however many inches they are, but when I do like this, it's much smaller, much smaller. So think about it. He's leaned over inside this mat with one arm extended to turn himself this way, making his body almost parallel to that mat. You could have very well fit in there, very well. I believe that the opening of the mat was 21 inches, something like that, 22 almost, 21 3/4, something like that. And his shoulders were 19 inches. So even square-shouldered, he probably could have barely fit in there. But if you start lifting down like this, or even like this, you become much smaller, giving much more ability for him to have gotten inside of there. And let's face it, it's foam. It's going to give. So let's say the opening was 19 inches or 21 inches. If you push back against that, you can probably gain 2 inches on each side of, you know, more space because of the phone that you just pushed back. So there's even more room. So that's not really a plausible working idea either. So I had said, let's talk about the Johnsons for just a second. And I had started to state that, you know, I would never accuse or slander someone. The social media campaign that has happened with this has been nothing but a glorified witch hunt. It's not fair to anyone that's been named. And, you know, I get that the idea behind, you know, the defense to that, well, life's not fair. No, it's not. But you're talking about children. These were kids when this happened. And their name was slung all over the media from literally like day 2 of this investigation. I think that the Bell's name came out. And then it just got further because they have a father who's in law enforcement. He understood exactly what was going on here, and he told his kids, you're not talking to nobody. I can't blame him for that. I can tell you I would probably do the same thing to my kid. I would get an attorney, because if you're asking me questions and I already know that the social media campaign has already tried me, judge, jury, and executioner, and said that I had something to do with it, no, I'm not going to let my kid talk. Absolutely not. Why would he? He invoked his Fifth Amendment, the kids, for his 2 sons, and I can't blame him for that. I want you to think about reversing those roles for just a minute. If your child was being questioned in something like that, and you knew that they didn't have anything to do with it, they had rock solid alibis, but their name was already, they weren't just asking to be questioned, their name was already being thrown around as a murderer on social media, on Twitter especially, and even Facebook. Why on earth would you let your kid go on record? You wouldn't. Case in point, Ryan Hall. Brian is a young guy. He's got some mental delays. He's trying to raise a child. He's not had the life that Brian and Brandon have had. Brian and Brandon are blessed to have wonderful parents that have been nothing but supportive for them. Ryan doesn't have that. And Ryan also doesn't have the financial means to have obtained an attorney at this point in time. So when the investigators knocked on his door, now not the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, I'm talking about now after the DOJ Michael Moore got involved with this case. So the first time that they came and questioned this kid, and I say kid, he's what, 19, 20 now, they said, you know, we want you to come with us. And then they keep him for 4 hours. Not sure if he was handcuffed during that time or not. I would have to ask him. 4 hours they grilled him. They said things like, we already know what you've done. Why won't you just tell us? And he has maintained through this entire thing that yes, he was friends with Brian and that they were close, but that he had nothing to do with KJ's disappearance, with him being in the mat, with him dying, with any of this. We see this quite frequently, and I'm not going to go conspiracy theory here, but let's pick off the weaker kid and see what we can get out of him. He is weaker. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have family support. He didn't have an attorney. He didn't evoke his Fifth Amendment right to not speak. He went with the investigators willingly. Now, why in the world would a guilty person have an investigator from the G.B.R, FBI, Department of Justice come to their door and say, yeah, sure, I'll go with you for 4 hours? No, he wouldn't do that. Anybody, whether he's got a developmental delay or not, if he had any common sense and he had anything to do with it, he's not going to just openly go with them, but he had nothing to hide. The kid's not hiding anything. He's down in Valdosta and he's trying to live his life as a 20-year-old father. End of story. And now, because of what Michael Moore has done in his witch hunt, that's taken, what, 2 years or 15, 20 months, somewhere around there now, he's had to get an attorney that he can't really pay for. His name has been gone through the mud. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's take a minute to talk about Brian's FSU scholarship. Kid worked his ass off, for lack of a better word, all through junior high, all through high school, to be a good athlete, to follow the rules. I've never seen anything that said that he had any disciplinary problems, any violent tendencies, any aggression issues, nothing like that. No mental health concerns. This kid had a full scholarship to a really well-vetted school, to FSU of all places. Now I want you to think about something. Attorney Crump, his alma mater is FSU. Now, I can't tell you for certain that the withdrawal of the scholarship on signing day, nonetheless, not 2 weeks before when he could get picked up by another college or have a little bit of time to submit to another college, the day of signing. FSU withdrew their scholarship. Said, no, we don't want you. We don't want our name put here. Maybe that was because of Jameis Winston and what he put the school through the year before. Who knows? But it seems kind of credible to me to think a little bit outside the box here and say that, well, Crump has an office right across from Florida State University. His alma mater is Florida State University. He's a huge donator to Florida State University. Could that have something to do with it? I'll let you be the judge of that. But those are the facts. So this will be video 3 of a sequence of videos on the death of Kendrick Johnson. So I wanted to take a minute not to defame or hurt a grieving family. I've said it before, I believe that the loss of Kendrick was tragic to the Johnsons. Again, I can't imagine losing a child. You should never have to bury one of your babies. That being said, the way that this family has gone about their plight for justice, if you will, and I say that with quotes, has been anything but correct. I mean, there's just not a better word for it. The injustice that has been done to the Bell family, to the Eakin family, to Ryan Hall is irrefutable. We've got a lost scholarship of probably $100,000 or more for football. We've got a family that literally had nothing to do with this. The Eakin family I'm speaking of, who the daughter has been accused on social media of luring Kendrick into the gym. I want to state for the record that Taylor Eakin was not dating Brian Bell at the time that KJ died. She wasn't. I've seen so many social media posts by supporters, but also by the Johnson family, that were just absolutely ridiculous. I think we have gone from a quote-unquote plight for justice to a plight for financial gain. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. I mean that from an unbiased set of eyes looking at this. I'll state again, I do not know the Bells. I don't know the Eakins. I have never met any of them. What I do know about them has been from conversations and investigating this case. The accusations have been so wild, unscrupulous. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous, for lack of better words. And that's not right. You know, people are still innocent until proven guilty. No one has been charged with a crime in this investigation that's been ongoing now for coming up on 3 years. And I feel as though the Twitter trolls, if you will, the Facebook trolls, they just, I think it's turned into a money scheme, and a race baiting issue. I believe fully that, and I want you to think about this from a real, true, honest standpoint. If Kendrick had been a white male that died in the exact same way, we would not be here today. I wouldn't be making this video. Um, the things that have been said, the things that have been done would not have taken place. And the facts are the facts. That's sad. It's truly sad. No lives matter more than any others. This was a 17-year-old boy that died in a very tragic and very sad way. He was not sick. He was not ill. He didn't have cancer. It was a tragic accident. And I don't understand how the family cannot understand that. If you use the case file, if you use the evidence that truly is there, you can see that this was a tragic accident. Any question that anyone has regarding his shoes or his whereabouts or his organs or his, whatever, can be answered factually. There really aren't any aspects of this case that cannot be answered with either science or true facts of what happened. I'll get to some of those too in a minute, but this family is, in my opinion, attempting to railroad a system for greed, for greed, for money, for financial gain. $100,000 lawsuit is a whole lot of money, and it names so many people. Even if you just look at the defendants that are in that case, if they all 38 of them, I think it is, corroborated together to cover up, if you will, the death of Kendrick or how he died, by putting him in a mat, which has been said, or whatever, the stories would have changed at some point. Somebody's testimony, somebody's comments, something would have changed. And the fact is that they just haven't. Everyone involved in this has been steadfast from the beginning. I'm not going to tell you that if something like this happened to my kid that I, wouldn't have questions at first, but once I was able to get those questions answered, it is what it is. Another thing I'd just like to say is that the Johnson family, by all rights, was not a family of means. They were working class people, just like most of us. And I feel as though comments that have been made, there was one comment made that they will own Lowndes County, they will own Harrington Funeral Home when this is done, so on and so forth. It all revolves around money. It's a get-rich-quick idea. They are at every rally, every movement, every BLM movement, every place that they can possibly go, pretty much every week or every weekend. They've made it their full-time job, in the name of seeking justice, to ask for donations. They have a very active GoFundMe. It's only generated like $2,900 in 6 or 9 months, but they continue to push hard for donations to that cause, to gain money off of this happening. I'm gonna just say something, and this is a personal opinion. I feel like Lowndes High School was negligent in some way. That's my personal opinion. It's nothing more than that. I feel like if it were me, rather than going on this murder witch hunt, I would have probably looked at the school for some kind of settlement, or, at least an admission of negligence in some way. It really and truly, yeah, it was a tragic accident. I don't know that there's anything the school really could have done to have prevented it. Nobody thought that a bunch of wrestling mats in the corner were going to be the cause of someone's demise. But just the same, it happened, and it happened on their property. And I'll state for the record that this is a school system that I attended. This is a school system that my children may one day attend again. It's not, I have no dog in this fight. I don't know any of these families personally. I don't know the superintendent of the schools personally. None of these people. But I do feel like if it were my child, that would have been the road that I went down. Instead of making up accusations, literally just making up stories as they went along, the numerous lies that have been told. Case in point, at one point, pretty early on after Kendrick died, Mr. Johnson, Kenneth Johnson, said on a telephone call to, I think it was the NAACP, that no one from the school or no officials from the school had talked to them, had, consoled them, had sent condolences, whatnot. And that is just not true. And that was from the very beginning. There were several members of the school, several teachers, coaches, that attended the funeral, that went to the Johnson home to offer condolences. People were very involved in this. They were very much mourning the loss of Kendrick. The whole school did. The whole community did. It's a tragic accident, but it's turned into a race issue. And it's not a race issue. This is not Trayvon Martin. No one was gunned down here. There's no person to blame here. And I'll leave you with this. I can guarantee you that any of the naysayers, any of the thousands of people out there that say, no, this wasn't right, something's fishy, this kid was murdered, whatever, any questions that are viable, legitimate questions that you have, I can answer. I can answer them with facts. The reason that I can answer them with facts is because, number one, I've reviewed the case file. I've looked at the evidence chain. I've looked at the autopsy. I've looked at the coroner's report. I educated myself before I spoke. And that is crucial. If you have a question, please feel free to send it to me. I can provide you with an email link to this video that will, you'll be able to ask me anything you want. And I can tell you factual evidence. Another place that you can check out is there's a Facebook page that is called Stand Up for Brian Bell. That page has done a fantastic job of not offering anything but true factual evidence in this case. Yes, it is entitled Stand Up for Brian Bell, and that is why it was created. However, there is very little to no demeaning, slander, defaming on that page. Not that I've seen. It's moderated, but the comments that come in from the opposition are looked at and answered. They're literally answered rather than just being blocked. Like, I tried to speak on, it was one of the Kendrick Johnson memorial pages or foundation pages a couple of times, and I just said, I feel like this happened, I've looked at this and this happened, and I was immediately, my comments were deleted and blocked. I was blocked. That's not how this works. That's not how it's supposed to work. A Facebook page is out there to present information from either side for that part of the cause, and you should be intelligent enough to, if someone has a difference of opinion, to talk about that, to have an open discussion about what you feel happened or what you've seen. Maybe there is stuff out there that I don't know or haven't seen or whatever. I don't feel like there is. I've done my due diligence here. I've been involved with this for over a year. But, you know, if you've got something that's credible, that's not um, a tweet from 3, 4 years ago, where Brian said, you know, I'm cleaning so many niggas or whatever right now, you know, you can't use things like that against a person. He was 15 at the time. I think that it was, you know, me and so jumped off of a 2-story building last night. Power cleaning niggas, I think was the comment that was made. And then that's with quotes. I don't use that word. Um, but, it, you know, people have construed that to, oh, he was a racist and he was going to kill black people or whatever. That's ridiculous. It's absurd. If I had, if my children were to be held to the fire for every thing they've ever said or every comment they've ever made on social media, God knows what kind of people they would be portrayed as. You know, I mean, they're kids. They talk out their ass. Um, so, you know, I can leave this part at that, but I just feel as though there's been a huge injustice done to the Bell family, the Eakins, to Ryan Hall, um, and these kids don't deserve it. If you look at the real facts and the evidence of this case, the kids do not deserve it. And that's my whole purpose of speaking out. And, um, you know, again, if you have questions, if you would like to talk openly about this case or, um, you know, anything that you don't understand, or if you're on the fence and you're like, well, I don't really know what happened, you know, this looks bad for this, but maybe this happened, whatever, I will talk to you. I have no problem talking to you. Um, I just feel like this needs to be looked at from all sides of the coin. So, thank you.